Hey guys, welcome to the show of Studio 70. I'm your girl Shavak.
And my name is Ezu, or you can call me Ed. And today we're skipping our normal introduction of our show because we're going to be doing a read through today and reaction to The Cell Next Door, Dylan Tallman. There's three books. Actually, we got all three books right here, if you can see them.
Nice.
But we purchased them. We're going to do a read through and we're going to react. And it's going to take a while. So we kind of want to cut out our usual discussions in the beginning. But
First,
before we do all that,
this is for education, entertainment purposes only. Please do your own research and always be kind to everyone friends, family, strangers, enemies.
everyone, thank you so much, Shirok. Yeah, so this is part one or book one to the three books that we have. And what we're going to do as we go along is I'm going to put some editing later where we'll put pictures and maybe some video, Shirok. So if people are looking at this and not staring at our face or staring at me reading at this, and if you're in the car or something, this is perfect to kind of
Yeah.
listen to. So without further ado, let's get this thing rolling. Okay, The Cell Next Door, book series one, I'll say it, by Dylan Tallman. Okay, here we go. Other books by the author. Okay, I'll skip that. Author's note. I sat 7 months in the cell next door to Chris. It is common knowledge that he was never interviewed since his arrest. It dawned on me while writing this book that I was actually interviewing him for 7 months straight. This is what consecrates my book from any other. I had to rack my brain for knowledge that was 4 years old when I sat with him. This is basically a documentary, a series for readers that appreciates true crime. This is quality firsthand information that stands apart from the quantity of third-hand information released by other writers and outlets. Now, Proverbs 25:9. Debate your case with your neighbor and do not disclose the secret to another. Introduction, and we'll pause after the introduction. Proverbs 23:23. Buy the truth and do not sell it. Also, wisdom and instruction and understanding. Blessings on top of blessings. Where were my blessings? I went to the Society to Dodge Correction Institute in a matter of a month. They didn't even want to put me in general population, yet I who due to my past and who I was. So they kept me in TLU, that's temporary lockup, until they could figure out what to do with me. Keep in mind, I was in two mental institutions prior to coming to Dodge County Jail. Couldn't handle me. So I was transferred to Winnebago Mental Health. While there, I ended up in a fight with multiple staff. So I was strapped to a board, carried and driven to um, Metadota Mental Institution. I'm sorry if I'm messing up these names. I couldn't handle being incarcerated again after 10 years in prison. I was ready to kill anyone and kill myself because I could not cope with the reality that I was going to be incarcerated again for a period of time. The reality of imprisonment was trying to sink in. However, I was not ready to accept my fate. I had been a fighter my whole life, and I was trying to fight the inevitable. I knew I was not out long. Sorry, let me repeat that. I knew I was not out long enough this time to establish any real ties to the community. 2 months free, I was going back. Nobody except my mother would miss me. Worst feeling ever. Worse yet, I was housed in a prison and not yet a prisoner. So the state of Wisconsin had me right where they wanted me. All I heard down in solitary confinement was yelling and people, meaning inmates, banging on their cell doors. The COs were wheeling in an inmate that was strapped down in a strap down chair, and he had a spit mask over his head. Very demoralizing because they had him naked and kept his neck bent so far back that the man could hardly breathe. I knew how he felt. I had been in this place more than a few times. I could taste OC spray. It was because someone was maced on the tier, so it went through the vents because the sergeant forgot to shut them off. I had no property, was just in a cell, and could do nothing. What bothered me more than any of these afflictions was the fact that I would not see my family, perhaps for a couple of more years. I would not be laid up with a woman again for perhaps a couple more years. The ones I chose to lay with would not remember me until it was too late for them, which was my release date. Typical females. No woman to hold me down that I could love on, to take my mind off of prison. I was going to do this all alone. I felt so alone and so low. I was turned all the way up in segregation, worse than other inmates. I did 6 months like that and worse before I was moved to Special Management Unit 11. I was moved to cell 13. Excuse me. I was moved to cell 13 on January 9th, 2020, next to Chris, who was housed in cell 14. So that's the introduction. Anything on that, Shrock?
No, it's just interesting, that he actually he had time to actually been moved to this so to Chris. But of course, he'd been through a lot himself. So one thing about the book that I'm noticing is definitely about his feelings and what he went through and how he actually got connected to Chris.
And you can get a little background that he just struggled
Hmm.
with a foothold to try to get out of jail, but couldn't stabilize himself to do that. It seemed like before he knew it, he ended up right back in where he was and
Right,
just had a lot of struggles and didn't have the support.
right. He did it.
All right, so let's go on to chapter 1, Proverbs 25:17. Seldom set foot in your neighbor's house, lest he become weary of you and hate you. Unit Levitt in Dodge Correctional Institute is a SMU, meaning Special Management Unit, where they house people who need to be in a single cell. This includes inmates who are troubled, disabled, or considered high profile. Based on my introduction, it is self explanatory which category I reside in. My cell was a decent size. I had to lock in because we only came out of our cell in the morning or non shower days for an hour. However, it was usually less because we would be let out late. At night, we were supposed to be let out from 6 to 7:30 p.m., an hour and an hour and a half. An hour and a half, 90 minutes, let's say.
Yeah.
It was mid-afternoon when I set my Bible down and decided to knock on the wall to see who my neighbor next to me in cell 14 was. I banged on the wall. Yeah, a soft, humble voice responded. Come to the electrical outlet on the wall, I said. I told him this because I knew from prior experience that we would be able to hear each other clear as day through them as they are connected to the same spot. Can you hear me? He asked. Yeah. What's your name, bro? I asked. It's Chris, he answered. I'm Dylan, I replied. We traded introductions. Chris explained who he was, and I elaborated some about my cases and my situation. He seemed like a very nice, normal guy and humble as ever. He told me that he had a life sentence, and I asked him why. He told me that he is accused of killing his family. I leaned off of the subject, and we got talking about where we were originally from. I am from Michigan, whereas he is from North Carolina. I could slightly notice that he had. I could slightly notice that in his accent. What is your faith? Chris asked me. I'm a believer in Christ. How about you? I asked. Same, he answered. I was relieved that he was not a Muslim, as I had this conversation before with a few people. Wasn't a fan of doing so and didn't want to again. Do you have a Bible? I asked. Absolutely, Chris replied, quickly and surely, without hesitation. Let's perhaps study then. Are you busy? I asked. I asked this to challenge his spiritual knowledge because I was so well versed in the Word of God. I doubted he was anywhere near the level of knowledge of the Word. I was wrong. To my surprise, he matched me in biblical knowledge. We studied until 2 or 3 a.m. That day, we met, and this became routine. We went to gym, we went to chapel, we ate, we spent the day room and used the phone. We studied the Word of God. I was in a rut mentally. I hated my miserable existence until I met Chris and got into our routine. I hardly wanted to go anymore until I felt awakened again spiritually, and Chris had something to do with that. I finally had someone that was actually intelligent enough to talk to now and didn't have to be cuffed up before leaving my cell anymore. My sanity was returning as I conformed to the A&E status. I was still not a convicted prisoner as of yet. And that's the end of chapter 1.
Mm.
Thoughts, Shirak, on that?
Yeah, so I guess they found some correlation of something that they both believe in, which is Christ, right? Because there's definitely
Yeah.
different religion, which is good, and so they start making a connection.
So it sounded like he was desperate, really, for some type of buddy or some type of connection with just
Hmm.
some kind of human being, and it sounded like that was a good basis to start with was their faith.
Right, exactly.
So again, probably establishing some trust and all that.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, Proverbs 23:12. Apply your heart to instruction and your ears to words of knowledge. Dodge Correctional Institute is an intake prison where all inmates are housed until shipped off to their next destination. Dodge figures out where exactly that is by staffing the inmates' needs and determines their custody level. Dodge is a max, though it is run like a medium custody prison. However, if you are intake like myself, you are considered A&E status. This means you are treated worse than a max custody inmate because you cannot order electronics, books, clothes, shoes, or anything. Nothing at all. It's rough. I was stuck on this status for 23 months due to Marathon County probation and parole not wanting me in society at all. COVID-19 also struck during my probation revocation process. Excuse me. I began writing a book called Poetic Knowledge. It was about the knowledge of God, basically through my poetry. I had published a book in 2013 called A Blessing in Disguise. So I was at it again, trying to be productive instead of crying about my afflictions. At night, Chris would pray for us, and the prayers were very well put together. I asked him one night if he wrote that. No, they just come to me, he replied. Well, maybe try writing one down, I suggested. Okay, perhaps I'll do that, Chris said. And then we went to sleep. The next morning, when our cell doors popped open for time in the day room, Chris handed me 2 prayers that he had written. I set them on my bed to review after day room. That short period was for my phone time. Chris would call his parents, his sister, or Anna, who was his girlfriend at the time. She was the kindest woman I have ever met. During day room, we would bring our Bibles with us. We would try bringing other inmates as well as officers to the Lord. After our time in the day room, I went to my cell and read 2 prayers that Chris had written. They were written exceptionally well, and this gave me an idea. You know the book I am writing, Poetic Knowledge? I asked Chris through the electrical outlet on the wall. Yeah, the spiritual poems, I like those, he replied. What would you think about co authoring a book where book 1 will be my entries and book 2 will be your entries? I asked. Let's do it. Do you think you can get it published? He asked. I did it once, so I'm pretty certain I can, I replied. Every time he wrote his entries, he would give them to me when our cell doors would pop open for our time in the day room. Time was going by and I was growing restless of Dodge. I hated doing the same exact thing every day. I still couldn't order from the JL Marcus or Union Supply. I was not yet staffed or even a state prisoner yet. Chris ordered clothes, envelopes, and stuff for me, which I was not allowed. Later, we would get in trouble for the unauthorized transfer of property. Hollywood tabloids and YouTube content creators would twist this completely out of context, causing people on social media to do the same. Proverbs 24:7. Wisdom is too lofty for a fool. He does not open his mouth in the gate. So that's the end of chapter 2.
Yeah.
So your first thoughts, Shirak,
I
and
just
then
want to
me.
say these are quick chapters, which is good.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I got to read
Sometimes
notes.
you read books and it's like the could be hours.
Yeah. And so basically just again establishes him, trying to write the book
Yeah.
and it's good he mentioned at the end about him Chris helping him get stuff for him because they were saying oh they had a relationship and There was a lot of
Right.
things
A
said
lot of
about this.
speculations, a lot of things because they noticed that they was sharing certain things.
Oh,
And well, that's one
yes.
thing about the media. They always want to conjure something up, right?
Exactly. So this is so far flowing well because it's
Mhm.
building up. How he got to know him, their
Right.
relationship,
I think
etc.
the intro was pretty good because it did say the relationship piece of it instead of just jumping into
Our cat is around here. Oh well, I hope
into
she'll
that
jump
everything.
on me while I'm trying to read. All right, here we go. Chapter 3, Proverbs 24:7. Wisdom is too lofty for a fool. He does not open his mouth in the gate. Life in prison gets lonely when you don't have a woman to talk to and keep you company. The woman in my life had fallen off already, 9 months into my bid. Every day, Chris would get a gang of letters. The correction officer would do his mail round around the cell hall and would have a load of mail. He would stop at cell 14 and deliver all the stack to Chris. He would say sorry and he passed my cell empty handed. Honestly, it would piss me off. Nobody gave a damn about me except my mom, my cousin Bree, and my Aunt Joy. He had a lot of fangirls and his girlfriend Anna. He also gave his parents uh, he also had his parents. I'm sorry. I didn't have a strong of a support system as I do now. That particularly has to do with where I was at in life. I didn't get mail today, so let me live my life through you again, I said to Chris. Chris would read his fan mail to me every day. Occasionally, there would be hate mail. It was not until a few weeks into his routine that Chris decided to give me one of his fangirl letters. It was one night when we were talking that he told me that he had a girl for me to write to. No, man, I don't want any of your groupies, I told him. Well, this one is probably the one for you, he said. If she is a good one, then why are you giving her to me? I questioned. Because the Lord told me to give you her letter to you, he explained. He never wrote to her instead of throwing her a fan letter in the trash. He decided that perhaps I would give her a shot, so I did. Her name was Chrissy. She was 42. She sent a picture and appeared to be short, pretty, and perhaps Italian. In her letter, she wrote to Chris, she presents that people deserve forgiveness and how she doesn't judge. She claimed to have lupus like his wife did, and also claimed to be a licensed clinical psychologist. Chris was not trying to hear any of it and gave me the letter. He said it was from God. However, later I learned it was truly from Satan. I wrote a letter saying that I was writing her because Chris gets so many letters similar to hers. However, her letter struck me out, and with her letter struck out, and with him I was being close. He entrusted me with it. I explained excuse me. I explained who I am and what kind of man I am. I held no punches. I was 100% with her. She loved my letter, or so I thought. However, she responded to me saying Chris's name 7 times and my name only twice. I responded by letting her know that I perceived that she was writing to Chris indirectly through me based on the letter she wrote to me. Chris and I began making plans for when we got out of prison. Now we needed to get him out of prison. We began to go over his case and the facts of his case. I knew that I knew the law very well by being a convict my entire life. So I was going to try to help him. Brother, what the hell happened that day? Are you being accused of all this? I can't remember a lot. Excuse me, let me start over again. Brother, what the hell happened that day you are being accused of all this? I can't remember a lot. He then sighed and added, it wasn't my hand. Well, just tell me what you remember, I asked him. He seemed to be racking his brain. I was having an affair with this girl, and I ended up in love with 2 women at the same time, Chris explains. So this has to do with what happened, I asked. Is what led up to what happened, he informed me. So tell me about the mistress, I asked. She is of evil spirits like Jezebel, he confessed. Let's just call her Jezebel then, I suggested. That suits her, he agreed. We laughed a little at this. He was going to open up more about the actual incident, so I tried something that would be a little more comfortable for him. Plus, he was becoming so cool, and I really didn't want to spoil my opinion of his character just yet. However, I don't think I would have judged him because I had been around the same inmates convicted of worse crimes, believe it or not. What made Jezebel so evil? I asked. Proverbs 7:27 and Proverbs 7:26. Sorry, Proverbs 27:26 and through 7:27, Chris answered. And that was as far as we got on the case that night. Proverbs 7:26 through 27. For she has cast down many wounded. Oh my goodness, sorry. For she has cast down many wounded, and all that were slain by her were strong men. Her house is in the way to hell, descending to the chambers of death. After reading these passages he provided me with that night, I had the idea that he was trying to tell me that his mistress had something to do with the case. Anytime her name came up, he would lose his composure, and his composure was always under control in other situations, just not when her name came up. I was learning this case in broken pieces. It was such a mess, and I was just trying to help him. The next morning, when we were discussing what we were going to do that day, Chris gave me his daily rituals. Number 1, writing his journal. Number 2, watch a sermon. Number 3, read a devotion, etc. So on this particular morning, I told him of a guy I did time with that had his whole day scheduled. I explained that the guy would wake up and turn on the TV onto Good Morning America, eat, brush his teeth brush his teeth at the exact time, take a let's just say crap at a certain time, read a chapter in his book at a certain time, watch the same shows at the same times. He would use the phone at the same time, do a word search at the exact damn time. Then the doors popped open for the day room, and upon leaving my cell, Chris handed me an entry for our book called Proverbial Knowledge. It was called Playing the Harlot. It was based on Proverbs 5, verses 3 through 5. For the lips of the immortal woman drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lay hold of hell. The entries about Jezebel's wife, the entries about Jezebel, wife of King Ahab. She wasn't a believer in God and persuaded her new husband to worship her god Baal. She also had the prophets of the Lord prosecuted and massacred, and matched another entry that gave me to that it matched another entry that it gave me that said how Jezebel made the king kill and how it was his hand but her that made the decisions. Chris was trying to tell me his story through scripture. It also reminded me of another entry he wrote called Plucking and Cutting. In the entry, he described how Jesus says that your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better to enter heaven maimed than to be cast into hell whole. Jesus meant this figuratively, of course. I would have some thinking to do. This man was my friend, and I didn't have a lot of people that I could call my friend. I was going to be at least try to help him. A lot of people were lost in prison, especially at Dodge. The majority of people at Dodge were just coming in off the street, coming through the intake status, not yet knowing their fate or where they would end up. On our unit, people were pretty lost as well. One guy named Dustin, who got out and ended up being killed by the police in a shootout, wound up lost in Chris's cell. It was during the day room that Dustin entered Chris's cell and stole some things. It was after day room that we found out because Chris noticed his coffee and envelopes missing. I asked if anyone had gone in his cell, and he mentioned that Dustin came came out of his cell, claiming he had entered the wrong cell by accident. I knew it was no accident. Since we were in lockdown for the night, I told him that I would handle it in the morning. Chris knew I could take care of his particular situation because handling the conflict was my job out of the two of us. However, I don't think he expected me to handle it the way I did. The next morning during day room, I sat down at the table with Dustin. I informed him that stealing from Chris was like stealing from me and that we would go in the cell and handle it, meaning fight. The guy stood up, so I got up. Then he threw his hands up and jumped backwards, thinking I was going to hit him, causing a scene. In prison, we call this dry snitching. The COs came running and commanded us to lock in our cells. Long story short, I ended up 16 days of room confinement. I could have handled the situation a number of different ways. Being on room confinement or quarantine was what Chris and I called being in the wilderness. That's when we wrote God's Plan 40-Day Devotional. That book was renamed and is now called New Plan 20-Day Devotional and is solely authored by me. I had Chris calling my mom for me and passing messages because my phone privileges were restricted as part of my room confinement. We got a lot of writing done. We spoke more about our lives and also spoke about our cases. We made a breakthrough. So that's the end of chapter 3. So what's your thoughts on that? Was a lot. Sorry.
Oh no, that's really good. Yeah, so that definitely still bringing some rapport and talking about like how he had Chris. I guess someone went in his room and he actually seemed like he's helping Chris. And if you notice these cases, like the question is why would he help Chris in a sense? Like they have this relationship, but he's like, yeah, I'm helping Chris. And when someone went in his room to steal, he told Chris he was going to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, it's kind of building that trust between the two of them.
Hmm.
He's kind of pitching these book things.
Yeah.
They didn't really get into too specifics, but he started cracking open the part that, his mistress is more involved than most
Right.
of it.
And I think to be honest, I think there's a something deeper than this, of course, gaining that trust, releasing that information, letting him know because how else he's gonna tell him. And I think that's a smart strategy. Like if I want to know if, was Jezebel or whoever was involved and how did it really happen.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Kind of being a little smooth.
yeah.
Chapter 4, Proverbs 25:4. It is better to dwell in a corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. It was mail time, and the sergeant was doing his round. I didn't even expect mail. I never did. However, on this particular afternoon, the sergeant actually stopped at my cell door and slid mail through. It was a letter from Chrissy/Christina. She seemed upset about my reply to her response to my introduction letter. She claimed that she really liked my letter, and she said that she was not indirectly writing to Chris through me. She said she was trying to get to know me and that people always did this to her, abandoning her. So I formed my response. I figured it couldn't hurt anything by getting to know this woman. I hollered over to Chris and asked him about his mail because he was awfully quiet. He told me that he had received a very strange letter. It was from someone named Becky. The woman said that NK said that she still loved him and was thinking of him. He ripped up the letter, flushed it, and claimed it was a hoax. Have you ever received mail from anyone before claiming that NK still loved you or anything even closest? I asked. No, Chris responded. Okay, then it was her, I pointed out. Becky? He asked. No, it was NK, I answered. I told him that he shouldn't have ripped up the letter because he may need it later. He said that he wasn't thinking about that at the time. This mistress, NK, really gave Chris anxiety. I have to point out, this is a side note, NK is Nicole Kessinger. It was more as if she scared him a bit. I rarely saw him lose cool or lose his composure. However, this woman just sending her love gave him reason to pause, and not in a good way either. Chris seemed a little more anxious that afternoon to get to studying our legal work. His parents brought us a Black's Laws dictionary. We were discussing his arrest, interrogation, and his memory of things. He told me he had trouble in remembering what happened, so I pointed out the things he did know. It turns out that the investigators interrogated him for hours prior to giving him a lie detector test. That kept telling him, oh, sorry, they kept telling him that he did instead of asking him what he did. He explained to me that he felt worn down and defeated by the investigators. It had been a confusing turn of events leading up to this point. Why does these girls get you all out of character? I asked. Don't you have a girl in your life that was so evil she turned your world upside down? He asked me. Indeed, I do. Many, actually, I admitted. You know, I was in a 5 year relationship once. The first few years were good. However, it was the last 2 years that broke us. I loved the girl I met, although I resented the woman I left. She is still, to this day, trying to cause me problems, and our relationship ended in 2007. Why did it end? Chris asked me. I left her, I explained. This woman cheated on me, got me thrown in jail, wouldn't let me leave or have friends. Wait, she got you thrown in jail? He asked. Yes, she did. I came home late one night from a cookout and I had like 2 drinks, if that. She accused me of being out partying and cheating on her. So ended up throwing some punches at me as I trying to leave. I had grabbed her around the arms to stop her, and she fell in front of the entertainment center. Some stuff fell and broke around her. She ended up calling the cops, and I was taken to jail. She was 19 years old, and I was only 17. We were together 2 years after this. However, it was the fatal blow that started us downhill. Bro, I will tell you more about her later. You tell me about your 2 women. Well, Chris sighed. My heart was in 2 places. Your heart doesn't have a brain, I interrupted. You are absolutely right, he replied. He told me that he and the mistress had been getting serious and close. He admitted that he was stupid to cheat on his wife and that he asked God's forgiveness every day for his infidelity. The mistress was growing on him. The wife he had his the wife had his heart. It was near the end that the mistress tried to make Chris choose between her and his wife and kids. I asked him who he chose. He said that he chose his wife and kids. The mistress was not too fond of the decision. Many questions flew around my head, so I asked the first one, when did she make you choose? The night of the incident, Chris admitted. Did your decision have any bearing on what took place, like the incident? I asked him. Well, he sighed. By then, my wife had already found out about the affair. This was around the time I was going to try working through our problems and try mending our relationship. I had kids with this woman and we were married. I couldn't throw all that away for some woman I just met, although I was about to. Yeah, I know about falling fast for a new woman because it happens to the best of us, I replied. David and Bathsheba, I referenced in the Bible. That is a perfect example. There are those temptations put in our path that we are supposed to overcome. Jezebel or NK was the forbidden fruit, which made her all the more desirable, I answered. Yeah, and it was costly, he admitted. That was far as we got that subject that night.
Mm.
All right. First, I got to apologize if I'm starting a little bit. My eyes, I have a bad eye, and sometimes it waters, and I have a hard time seeing. But so you go
That's
first,
pretty
Shirak.
good. Yeah, it was just yeah, they still talking about the relationships and how they got where they are, which is interesting. They revealing what happened, their perspective. Even though he's saying that Chris Watts, was saying that he had 2 hearts and she had, I mean, he was in love with both of them. But I know he had problems before NK, because that was always revealed.
Mm-hmm.
because Shanann's, I guess, Chris' mother never liked
No,
Shanann, and that was
no.
before NK came in the picture. So there was some other stuff that Chris really didn't talk about.
No, you could tell he. I think Dylan is doing a little quid pro quo, or like trading off. Okay, I'm telling you a little bit. Now you feel obligated. You should tell me a little bit.
Exactly.
And you could tell he's trying to get out of him a little.
A little much as possible.
But so far, you could tell Chris is you know letting it loose. That he's shifting a decent amount of blame on Nicole Kessinger. But of course, he's his own person. He could just say,
Mm,
you know, I'm sorry, I'm going with my kid. I guess he didn't want to lose her. I don't know
right,
what that
and
was said in that
that was kind of
111-minute phone
shocking.
call.
It was shocking when he said, "Oh, I choose my family." That's what it said, right?
Yeah, and then I guess
Like
he's
really?
trying to say maybe it was that 111-minute phone call. Maybe it was going
No, I
back
don't
and
think.
forth where he didn't want to lose her, but he was kind of choosing his kids. I don't know. He's kind of talking back and forth.
Yeah, I don't.
He probably
I don't
still
think.
wanted both, and I don't know. It's a little. We'll get to that at the end, but chapter 5. Proverbs 26:5. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. Around 4:30 p.m., we would get let out to go to rec or gym, depending on the weather. On this particular day, we were at the gym. Everyone decided it would be Unit 11 versus the GP workers, who were exceptionally good at basketball. However, Chris and I were a little bit better, so we stuck with the misfits. One misfit named Collins didn't even know which end of the court to shoot from. The one shot he did make, he scored from the wrong basket. I kept using him as a pickup as well. It was hilarious. We still won. After the game, Chris, me, and Collins, and some other guys were standing around talking. Collins, you are a virgin, so how do you even know that you are the way you are? I asked him. He was claiming to be transgender. He wore a bra and panties provided by the DOC, or by the doc. I'm sorry. I don't know. I haven't been with anyone, but I would like to be with a woman. Maybe Colin said. You are just confused. You believe in the Bible, right? I asked. Well, yeah, Collins answered. You cannot put your bra and panties on a lamp. Otherwise, it wouldn't light up the whole room, Chris said. I almost died laughing. Jesus said that, I said, laughing. Jesus actually said, don't put a lampstand under a basket or it won't light up the whole room. While we were all talking, the CEOs came over to the loudspeaker and announced that recreation was over. On the way back, there was this female CO walking directly in front of Chris and me. Her hips were swinging so hard that she may as well have been on a stage. I pointed at her ass and told Chris, Bro, look. I pointed at her voluptuous figure shaking her way all along in front of us. No, Chris, looking away and down. You mean to tell me you can't notice that nasty walk she got on her? I questioned. I think your horns are pointing in the wrong direction. Chris pointed to my hair, which was in long twists pointed out everywhere. My hair looked stupid. Due to COVID, our barbering was scarce. So you can't notice, I reiterated. It's kind of hard not to, man, Chris finally admitted. We followed that ass all the way back to Unit 11. She has a mother by the name of Turner that works there, and she's beautiful too. That night, Chris called his girl Anna, and I called Christina. She was telling me some detective who wanted to help Chris wished to speak to him. I told her I would pass the message. It was not even 10 minutes before I already compartmentalized this request from Christina to least important stuff. Let's see. I'm editing, I'm not saying some swears, and closed the door. It felt good to talk to a woman. However, I knew she was not 100% about all the stuff in her life. She was she had ulterior motives. A fight just ensued that caused our day room to close, and we had to lock back in our cells. I would not be able to call my mother tonight. Dodge Correctional Institute was boring prison. All they did was lock us in our cells. I was stuck on this probation hold for about almost a year now. I was possessed. I was in possession of alleged 6 ecstasy pills only and on a hold this long and more to go. Probation and parole already got 11 years out of me. Excuse me, let me back up a little bit. Sorry about that, guys. Probation and parole already got 11 years out of me. Oh, I'm missing it. Is there missing a page? Okay,
You don't
it's
have
weird
it.
how it's just a weird sentence. Probation and parole already got 11 years out of me incarcerated at this point and still wanted more. Since we were already locked in, I sent my fishing line over to Chris's cell to get some food. The line was made out of a dental floss with a comb at the end. He would see my line and then slide out under the door to catch mine. Then he would pull it under the door. Next, he would attach the food, which was chips, flatten them, and hit them. Oh, and hit the wall, meaning it was time for me to pull them in. Chris looked out for me on Canteen. He was allowed to order from the catalogs and in me. Not being staffed there, I was not. He ordered me clothes as well. He gave me a brand new thermal tops and boxers. They had this name and the doc number stamped in them that I could not erase. It wouldn't come out. That night, there was an argument between 2 guys. I would just say a black guy and a Puerto Rican disguised their identities. They had some words and then they decided they would fight when the doors popped open. This was normal on Unit 11. We went to sleep after we prayed and ate. It was morning and the doors were popping open, 2 at a time for a cell cleanup. I was tired. I was up and washing my face, and I heard thumping and the radios going off with keys jingling. The black and the Puerto Rican guys were fighting. It didn't last long because 20 staff showed up to break it up and haul these guys off to segregation. They were both maced, so the pepper spray was in the air, and we were all choking on the spray. Chris was very quiet on this particular morning. Finally, my cell popped open for cleanup. The tall, swamper inmate worker came into my cell to put the cleaning solution in my toilet. I started giving him body punches. We did this every other morning. While I gave him punches that he tried to block and fail, it was fun. You guys, please stop, Chris said in a worried manner. We stopped the horseplay. Chris was scared for us. He didn't like us fighting, and I was worried that he would get hurt. I thought to myself, this man supposedly killed his family, so how did a hint of violence scare him? Plus, with the fight just taking place with the other 2 guys, it was probably best for us not to be fighting either, playing or not. I was getting restless. I wanted to go back home to my family. I wanted to be laid up with a woman. I wanted to be able to eat what I wanted when I wanted. I wanted to have a phone, no locked doors, and I wanted my real clothes instead of prison greens. I don't know why I was stressing when my spiritual brother next door had a lifetime to do in prison. I knew a lot of my brothers that were never going home, so my situation was nothing to complain about.
Hmm.
I don't know. That wasn't really much there. I mean, that's just more like information. I guess
Yeah,
he was just trying to say, hey, how could this guy really do this if he doesn't really like my I mean, but
fighting.
that's not
Yeah,
really anything. I mean,
personality wise.
he's not used to he's had a good parents and good life. He's probably not used to fights all the time.
Well, that's
One
right.
thing doesn't have to do with the other.
Exactly, I agree with that. And I just wanted to also know the letters we never elaborate on. I know Christina seemed like she's getting information from Dylan, but I think she probably be doing Chris. But that's like kind of
Of
a mix,
course. That's why I
like
think he said.
yeah. So he's acknowledging that, and because he was shocked that she wrote him back.
Yeah. As far as the NK thing, there wasn't really a lot in that chapter. But
Mm.
again, just, good information in terms of getting to know Chris and all that.
Yeah, and the
So let's
horseplay
see.
and the fighting too. Like it's just always fighting in jail, which is crazy.
And again, I apologize, guys, if I have to stop. I'm still coming over, getting over a cold, so my eyes are watering. Sometimes a little hard to read. And this one, it's weird. It says chapter 6, it says Proverbs. Well, look, there's nothing there. There's not a verse.
Mm.
Okay, chapter 6. As in water face reflects face, so a man's heart reveals the man. Hey, I'm that guy, Chris yelled over to me. I came over to the outlet on the wall in my cell. What do you mean? I asked him, puzzled. You know, the guy who planned the whole day, he replied. Oh, yeah. And you don't want me to be that guy, right? I asked him. No, not after I caught myself living my whole day planned. What do you do? He asked. I just do about whatever the spirit leads me, I told him. The spirit led me to start a new book in our series. It's called ep, what is it? I can't say this right. Epistles. Basically, we're breaking down the Word of God to readers, interpreting the Bible. I explained. That's why we do. That's what we do all day anyway. So why not? Chris agreed. Since he was going to break routine now, he talked for a while. He told me about his girlfriend Anna and his parents both sending POA, power of attorney paperwork, to help him with his appeal and getting him a lawyer. I read the POA papers and I explained to him that neither of them had anything to do with talking to his lawyer, nor did they have anything to do with his criminal appeal. Both sets of papers only had to do with his finances. He never signed them. He wouldn't have signed them either. I wouldn't have signed them either. His girlfriend and his parents had enmity between them after that. Possibly, however, Chris's parents agreed to pay half. This Earl guy was not a licensed attorney, but really a jailhouse lawyer. Chris's parents never did pay their half, but Anna put all of the money up. She swore that this was an attorney. However, his parents swore he wasn't. They weren't going to put up $1,700 for something close to that amount. Chris had a recent conversation with Anna where she cited Genesis 2:24. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and shall become one flesh. Honor your father and mother. Deuteronomy 5:16. Chris replied. After this, Chris saw scripture that he took to heart and walked out of his relationship with Anna completely. Micah 7:5. Do not trust in a friend. Do not put your confidence in a companion. Guard the doors of your mouth from her who lies in your bosom. However, Chris failed to read Micah 7:6, which says, For a son dishonors his father, daughter rises against a mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own household. Anna tried to point this to no avail. I liked Anna a lot. I also liked his parents. I was unbiased neutral party. He ended up walking away from his relationship with Anna. She had me ask Chris why, and I did not ask him. Tell her Micah 7:5 instructed. So I told her my response letter to her. Chris kept getting called to the business office to sign over his house to his wife's family. I kept advising him not to do it until he could have that house swept for evidence. He prolonged signing it over week by week, coming up with excuses. Prison was boring. All Chris and I did was number 1, write books, 2, study the Bible, 3, work on our cases, 4, pray, 5, work out, 6, play sports, 7, use the phone, 8, eat, 9, study more, 10, talk, 11, talk some more, 12, write letters, etc., etc. After working out, Chris and I started talking about our women. I explained that Christina can be a little crazy. He informed me that his wife had a crazy side because she was from Jersey. I began venting to him about how no matter what I do, the justice system keeps judging me on my past, where I am my past. Chris listened silently and replied saying, I wish they would judge me on my past, he sighed. Instead, they only judge me on that one day, he added. You're absolutely right, I said, because you had never been in trouble with the law. You were a hardworking citizen. You were a perfect father, righteous husband, I added. Well, I did commit adultery, so I was a terrible husband, he said. That's hardly a crime, I pointed out. So you were going to leave your wife at any point? No, I felt bad for cheating and I tried to work things out with my wife right before the tragedy, Chris told me. Was your mistress upset about it? I asked. Oh, yeah, he answered. I have to ask, why the first confession? It was all confusing blur, he managed. Okay, then why did you switch the confession to you taking all the responsibility? I asked him. Because I wanted to honor my wife in her death as in life. For her family as well, he admitted. Are you going to at least appeal and get the correct story out there? I asked. My character is assassinated anyway. I don't need that stress on my wife's family because even though they hate me and want me to rot and die, I do care for them, he answered. Well, bro, which confession was the truth? I asked. The first confession is the closest to the truth. However, I don't know if I can go back through the court and relive all that again, he informed me. Let's just pray on it. God will lead you in the path you need to take. It's the glory of the kings to search out the matter, however, the glory of God to conceal the matter. Proverbs 25:5 I cited. He understood. Okay, and that's the end of chapter 6. So I'll start first because I want to
Yeah.
ask you this. At the end there, he's saying the first confession was correct. That was when he said that Shanann uh, murdered the kids. If that's, it's hard because they're not being specific in this book.
I
But
know.
if that's the case, I don't think that's true at all.
Right.
Do you have any other thoughts
Well,
on?
yeah. And I'm taking this information as not being accurate anyway. I don't think it's all fact. I don't think it's all the truth. I mean, that's just me because I always think that people just tell you what they want you to hear and what they want you to believe.
Yeah,
But
Dylan is just collecting whatever Chris is telling him. So if
exactly,
Chris is not being honest with him, then that's gonna be passed down.
exactly.
Um, yeah, and the whole thing. And here's another thing too. Chris says, "Oh, I was trying to work things out with my wife." Your wife was exhausted from
Hmm.
traveling, coming back. How long did you try to work things out with her? An hour?
Exactly.
I guess.
Exactly. Yeah,
Like,
like I said,
really? I
what
don't
he was
think
saying is
so.
not he's trying to work things out. He did not want to work things out. He already had his mindset that he wanted to be with his mistress and
Yeah,
whatever
exactly.
went through. And I always believed that took time to.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for hanging there with our reading and reaction. I'm
Yeah,
not reading the best, I apologize. I want to get this out soon. I'm struggling, like I said, with a cold, so and my eyes are watery, so
yeah,
it's a
thank
little
you
hard. But
guys.
thank you so much for being patient with the reading today. I think this is
We
the last
almost
chapter.
close. Yeah,
What's that?
so we almost close to the
We're
end.
close. Number 7, chapter 7. Proverbs 28:17. A man burdened with bloodshed will flee into a pit. Let no one help him. Time was going by so fast, and our progression with the books was coming along quickly. We had our God's Plan series up to 6 books: 1, 40-day devotional; 2, poetic knowledge; 3, book of prayer; 4, epistles, if I'm saying it correctly; number 5, mystery through the ages; and number 6, proverbial knowledge. The staff members were beginning to crack down on us for any and every little thing. We wrote our entries for the book with my legal loan paper, which had my doc number stamped on it. I had to send the manuscript out to somebody or risk it being confiscated. That would be 7 months down the drain. I wasn't risking it. I had to figure out who I could trust with it. Christina said she would try getting it published, so there was that angle to perhaps consider. Chris and I talked more and more about our plans for when we get out. In the back of my mind, I knew for him the possibility was slim. However, I needed to instill hope in him or he would never try. In my heart, I believed that he was a great guy and didn't belong in prison. He was not like the rest of the inmates I had been around during my decade in the penitentiary, although a lot of people had a very low opinion of him. They were, of course, people who didn't know him personally. I grew close to Chris's family. His mother sent me letters. His girl and sister sent me lyrics. They were very nice people, and they didn't think of me as a no good scumbag like half a society did. We delved deeper into the case and made progression. Chris was beginning to open up more to me about everything on this particular day. We were discussing the case and appeal. I was looking for grounds for appeal. So, you're saying that you took a plea before having a preliminary hearing, I asked? Yes, Chris replied. Are you sure you didn't waive your rights to a preliminary hearing, I asked? What do you mean, Chris asked. Did you sign something that say you won't want a preliminary hearing, I asked? I don't think so, he managed. Why did you sign a plea agreeing to the maximum punishment? I questioned. Colorado had a death penalty, and they told me that if I didn't take the plea, that they would give me the death sentence, he told me. That's basically a threat. Sign here or die, right? I replied. It felt like that, he said. I don't think they can do that, bro, I told Chris. I leafed through the Black's Law Dictionary and found change of venue. Bro, says that if your case has a lot of publicity, you can hear your case somewhere else, and in your case, perhaps another county. I laughed, or another planet, he laughed. Oh, I'm sorry. I think he meant country. Perhaps another country, I laughed, or another planet, he laughed in return. At least he could find humor in his nearly hopeless situation. My attorney told me to file ineffective assistance of counsel of him, he said. So basically, he told you that he didn't assist you in the best possible defense or required by law, I said. Also, it takes these types of cases a couple years to resolve. Yours only took a few months. That's not normal or never heard of, I told him. If you go back to court on appeal, they will transfer me back to Colorado, and the inmates and the people there wanted to kill me, which is why they sent me here, he explained. I am just not looking forward to reliving all of this. It was the worst thing I've ever experienced, he said. I know, but do it for your parents. They love you, and it would mean a lot to the world. It would mean the world to your mom, I said. Yeah, it would, but I said these phone calls are recorded, and I said too much over these phone calls, he admitted. You also had 3 different confessions. People don't know what the hell happened, no matter how many different ways you say that you did it, I explained. Because I confessed how I will come back from that. Because I confessed how I will come back from that, Chris asked. They threatened your life and got to you. No, wait, bullied you into a guilty plea. You were an easy target. The husband, they needed this case under wraps for some reason, I conveyed. There was an election coming up, I think he said. Now, we can go over these circuit court trial errors all day, but it won't come down to you fighting your case again if you get your sentence overturned. You will be back on trial, I said. Then the truth will have to come out. I don't want to cause my wife's family any more grief, Chris said. What about your family and their constant grief? I pointed out. All you can do from here is redeem yourself because you confessed to murdering your wife and kids in cold blood, I said. We didn't. I didn't murder them in cold blood, Chris replied, slightly defensive. My wife came home and she knew I was having an affair. We got into a fight. She attacked me. I wasn't simply defending myself. Sorry, messed it up. She attacked me. I was simply defending myself. And then my daughter, she standing count, the sergeant announced, interrupting our conversation. After did she, oh my God, let me read this again because it's kind of written really weird here. I was simply defending myself. And then my daughter, so it sounded like he was starting to talk further. Standing count, the sergeant announced, interrupting our conversation. After she did her round, we continued our conversation. After a while, I talked to Jezebel. I panicked, so I confided in her, and she said she would help me, he said. My wife medicated her heavily that night because she kept crying. That's weird. Sorry. Sometimes this jumps around a little bit. After I panicked, I confided in her, and she said she would help me, he said. My wife medicated her heavily that night because she kept crying. After I killed my wife by choking her to death because she had a knife, something in me just died. It was an accident. I loved her with all my heart and still do. It's such a tragic loss. I just want to honor her memory and not ruin her memory. People want the truth, but I don't want to owe it to anyone. It's my family that I lost, and it's me that's serving life in prison. Where, what else do I owe? Chris asks. You owe yourself a fair chance redemption at that. The truth shall set you free, bro. The ball's in your court. Only you can appeal your case. Only you can put the truth out there, and only God can judge you, I explain. Well, they tell me to answer my hand on the Bible and swear. Oh, when they tell me to put my hand on the Bible and swear, I'm going to open it to where Jesus forbids oaths, Chris laughed. Well, I am not sure how that will fly, but I would love to see the reaction in the courtroom, I said. Anyway, I told my mistress what had happened, and she told me how to hide my wife's body. She said to bring the girls with. I was just on autopilot. I'm sorry. I'm pausing here because this chapter, the writing's a little rough. Let me repeat it again so you guys can get this in context. Anyway, I told my mistress what happened, and she told me how to hide my wife's body. She said to bring the girls with. I was just on autopilot, like in shock. So I grabbed my younger daughter out of bed. She was asleep. My older daughter was awake and asked about her mom. I told her that she was in a deep sleep and that daddy was going to get some help to wake up. Before we left, I had to check in with and then Mr. Tallman, you have a pass to see PSU, the sergeant announced. I was going to see my clinical psychologist. We'll finish this conversation when I get back, all right? I suggested. Yeah, sure, Chris replied. I have heard a lot about people cases directly from them. This case was different from the rest. I had a discerning spirit that I was able to tell that he wouldn't murder a fly in cold blood. However, what I know so far is that he killed his wife, but not intentionally. Next, I was going to find out what exactly happened to the girls. Until next time. And that's the end. I won't get into the last part. That's epilogue. We'll skip the epilogue for now. I think that's good.
Mm.
All right. So, because I'm having trouble reading
So
this.
I'm hearing that that was some self defense type of BS.
Yeah, she came at him with a knife. I don't know about that. And then, okay, it was accidental. So at least he's clarifying what version, I guess, is the true version. And at
And
least he's saying he
so
murdered
what
her
type
by
of
accident.
what about self defense for the girls? What type of they came at him too?
Well, that's the next. Now that's a little entry for you. Got to hang in and watch part 2, and hopefully I'll be in a better situation. We can. My cold will be a little bit more gone. We can read that one and go with that. And plus, too, the way it's written. Remember, this is not a professional person
Yeah,
reading
it's
this,
not.
and nobody's like writing it for him. So there's some sentences I'm actually not. There's a lot of words I read incorrectly, but there's a few parts where I'm reading verbatim, but it doesn't. It's more slang almost, or it's more like a thought starts and then it goes into something else.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not being critical. I'm just saying as I'm reading it, sometimes I might pause and reread it again because I just have to put it into context because it jumps around a little bit. But it's good that at least it flows in a particular order, and it's giving the information. Again, Dylan's just passing along the information that he's receiving
Hmm.
from Chris. So, any last comments? Because I can see Shrock's like, okay, not a lot of excitement in terms of new material, but
Right, exactly. But yeah, like you say, he's transferring information, and who knows if it's exact verbatim, right? So it's like
exactly,
he's interpreting his own words of what actually happened. But
yeah,
interesting, interesting. But a lot of the stuff we is definitely public information.
yeah. And we talked about some of this already, some of the summary. So we'll go through it again, but
You did a good job.
thank you, thank you, thank you. Under the circumstances, I did all right. I just didn't feel right about having an AI bot read through it.
Yeah, we thought about that, and I think that was
I
not
think it's
the
just
way
better
to
if I
go.
read through it.
That's very good.
So
Good
thank you
decision.
guys so much for hanging in there,
Thank you.
and then check out our part 2. All right. So until next time, Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Studio 70.
I was waiting for that.